Hi, everyone. So, again, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get going in today's webinar, Quality as a Team Sport. My name is Bob Cruz, CEO and co-founder of Checkpoint Technologies, and I'm very excited to be moderating today's session. And our primary presenter, I might be interjecting here and there as I do have 31 years of experience in IT, and for the past 19, I've had a real passion for quality assurance and software testing, especially when it comes to risk analysis, test automation, and transitioning from waterfall to agile and to DevOps. So I am now very pleased to introduce the primary presenter, Sohail Huq, VP of Technical Services. Sohail?
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you happen to be. I hope you are safe. My name is Sohail Huq. I actually am the VP of Technical Services here. My background has been 30 plus years in the IT environment, and I've been working in the configuration space and quality management for that time. Between 1988 and 1999, my brother and myself actually owned a company in the configuration management space and quality management space. That's a little bit about me.
All right, thank you, Sohail. And Sohail and I do absolutely love questions. We would like to make this as interactive as possible, which is always a challenge when it comes, obviously, to virtual webinars. So please, feel free to submit questions. You should see a control panel as seen on the slide right now. You can toggle between full screen or window mode, but the most important thing is you should see a questions panel where you can submit questions. We are more than happy to accept questions during the webinar. And then at the end, we do have some time allotted for Q&A. If for some reason we're not able to get to all the questions, we will absolutely be answering all of the questions and documenting those, and then emailing those out to all those who registered. And also, just to let you know, today's webinar is being recorded. We will be more than happy to share that with you. And then also, we will be happy to share the slides with you if you just send us an email in PDF format. So with that being said, Sohail, take it away, sir.
Thank you, Bob. So today, as Bob had mentioned, we're going to be talking about quality as a team sport. So again, being very cautious and being very sort of politically correct about this, what we're going to be dealing with from an organization perspective is we're looking at the challenges. We'll look at the inefficiencies and the ineffectiveness of being able to deliver code and application on time, lack of collaboration, lack of quality combined with delayed deployments. Again, I'm being very sort of generalistic about this, so I just wanted to make sure that we understand that. Now, in that realm, the benefits of treating quality as a team sport gives you the ability to be able to have more effective teams, handling paradigm shifts, new ways of collaborating, being holistic versus myopic. Again, we'll talk in more detail about some of these things, but, especially like, for example, the holistic versus myopic, and as well as establishing a culture of quality within the organization. Handling paradigm shifts, we do that every day, and I think it's a good thing that we are capable of doing that sort of stuff. Teams can be much more effective if there is much more, if there is more collaboration, but as we said, we'll go through this. So what is software quality? So software quality basically is defined, we can define it as quality, meaning that you're delivering a business value or you're capitalizing on your business agility. But essentially, quality really is a journey. It's a journey from, your start to your finish to the delivery and keeping pace with the technology and the space that you're in. But it also means that, we're really trying to sort of capitalize on that. So when we look at quality in general, why the evolution in quality that's going to occur, that is occurring, I apologize. Enterprises are now software companies with a specialty. So again, let's talk about very specifics, mobile applications, companies that have legacy applications that have moved into the mobile applications. Your customers are maturing because of the fact that they have these iPhones and your Android phones. So all these applications and everything else set together becomes a very sort of tight-knit environment.
And you know, Sohail, it's really interesting. How many years have you been in IT, Sohail?
Ooh, you want me to admit that on the air?
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
that's
yeah. I know, I know.
it's
Putting you on the spot.
yeah, it's about 38 years. So.
About 38 years, and as I mentioned, I've been in IT for about 31 years. So I, and certainly you, have seen a lot of changes in technology. So when you think about it, it only makes sense that quality, how we validate and verify quality, would evolve it well. It just has to.
Yep.
So I mean, great points here.
So, and it goes, the other part of this, thank you, Bob. The other part of this is also user experience is no longer just a hip, agency. So user experience is with the fact that your Androids and your iOS phones, everything else put together, if you can't get to something very simply, very quickly from your phone, then, it becomes like a user experience disaster. Three people in a cheap apartment, or should we say, three people in a garage, can also topple over somebody's business if they're not really paying attention to the quality. Some simple examples, say for example, of people who have started out companies with the right vision, with the thought and the ability to be able to execute, are things like Microsoft, Google, Amazon. They all started out three people in a garage type thing, and they've grown into large organizations, and they also keep up with their quality as well. And they're very concerned about that because everyday experience either basically allows them to shop more or shop less. It depends.
Great point. Great point.
And now for those on the phone who probably, I'm not entirely sure how many people are on the phone right now because I'm not looking at the panel, but essentially if you're born in the 60s and the 70s, then you're really kind of experiencing the entire gamut of the different evolutions that have taken place. So as I mentioned before, between 88 and 1999, I owned a software company that basically delved in the monolithic and highly opinionated software. Again, for that time, it was the software that everyone needed, and that was what worked. And of course, in the 90s, the HTML, World Wide Web, and of course, with the introduction in the 2000s and starting of the open source, and that sort of led to more complexities in the evolution of your applications. And then, of course, the Androids, the iPhones really kicked in. So now you've just added a whole different level of complexity to it as well. So the curve itself is actually going to be very steep when it comes down to it. And as we, as people, engineers, evolve, we're actually going to be developing new technologies. We're going to be pushing the envelope quite a bit. So traditionally, just to take you back in time a little bit, we used to deal with things at the end of the cycle, which meant that we are looking at the defects and issues coming up during our, testing / products release to production. That was a very costly way of doing things. So because we actually delved in the old waterfall methodology. Now, what we're looking at is the screen that we're looking at, or the vision that you're looking at right now, talks about the cost of change. Right, so if we're looking at the requirements and we're finding flaws and defects in the requirements, it's going to be a lot less expensive for us to fix it there than it is to do it once it gets out to a released environment. And again, these are things that we've known for a while. It's just that sometimes we're not practicing all the time. So just kind of recapping over that, in traditional software delivery methodologies, we used to plan, code, build, test, release, and deploy and operate. Now, to be realistic with you, back in the day, we didn't really do the planning. We actually sort of went straight to the coding and the building, and then we find the planning section comes in at the back end of this and now causes us all kinds of problems, so we have to go back to the coding. So this waterfall methodology was great, and it worked really well, except that if you didn't follow the right plan, then you kind of got yourself into a bit of a rut there.
And remember back in the day, Sohail, where this process, when I first started off as a COBOL developer, I mean, we'd have a new release out maybe every 18 or 12
Correct.
months.
Yes.
And a 6-month release, holy man, that was considered lightning speed.
It was, yes.
And now we've got companies like Yahoo and whatnot doing hundreds of releases a day.
Pretty much, and that's what the web application is all about, and that's what that sort of keeping up with the the Joneses across the street is basically all about. How do I get my software? How do I get my customers? How do I make them buy from me quicker than the other person? Because if it takes me 2 seconds longer to get something from one site, then I'll go to the site that I can get it much faster. So anyway, continuing this idea, I mean, this was what we traditionally dealt with, and just to kind of show that, we did all the quality at the end, which means that we were actually doing a lot of work at the end. It's not something that needs to be done at the end. It's not something that should be done at the end. It should be part and parcel of the entire enterprise, right? So when we're looking at the enterprise, we want to make sure that we have implemented quality at the beginning, the design phase, the implementation, the verification, and maintenance. Now, just to kind of give you a couple of ideas of what we've done, I've actually worked with a couple of companies to implement things like this, and we've actually introduced things like very radical. I'm sure some of you are familiar with BDD, which is the behavioral design, behavioral thing. So what happens there is the Gherkin format that you can use. And that's normally applied to the testing world, right? It's for test cases. So you can write your Gherkin formats in that way. You can write scenarios, or you can write scenario outlines. Now, here's an interesting radical thought, and that's what we implemented with the client, and it worked really well. It was to actually use the BDD format to write the requirements. So now we've got very simplistic requirements being pulled in by the BAs while they're talking to the customer, where they can use the scenarios, where, then, if, where, that sort of stuff, and they can actually define the requirements clearly. So the customer, one, has the ability to be able to articulate well. The BA can articulate it because in a way that the customer understands. The designers can view it and understand exactly what they're looking for, and the implementers can look at it and go, am I on the right track? The quality people are going, let me test against what was actually written in the first place, and is the application working to that level? And that basically helps you from that perspective. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to be right for every single person. It depends on your organization and depends on the way in which you work. But for this particular organization that I implemented the solution for, it's working really well because it's a simple English language functionality. We don't have to write pages and pages and pages of stuff for a single requirement. It's very clear. So from that, what we're doing is we're looking at the ability to be able to have continuous delivery. And of course, technology changes every day. Our goal is to produce and release software as fast as possible and maintain the highest quality as possible as well. I mean, sure, I can put software out there very fast, but if the quality is no good, again, we're back to square one. It doesn't meet our requirements. Organizations have to be very conscious about that. So with this, there's also a number of different technologies you can implement. So all technologies are not equal. All technologies don't actually suit every single organization. So you have to be very careful about what is it that I need to basically achieve? What is my technology? How can I best use it? Should I use something like Kubernetes? Should I use Docker? Should I use some automation tools? And we'll come to that a little bit further on. But essentially, that continuous software delivery, it has to be a smooth process. It has to be something that we can identify, build, deploy, and cycle that whole thing back around again. Methodologies are going to continue to evolve, and there's going to be different things that we're going to basically encounter going into the future. So we also have to be capable of making sure our applications are such that they can evolve with us. There's no gain in writing something that isn't capable of being able to be adapted. So if we look at how the enterprises are responding, they've got test management offices now. We've got testing center of excellence. We've got engagement of multiple personas. So again, the test engineers, the developers, the BAs, all these personas need to basically sort of fill in and work with the teams to basically figure out how to respond to the organization's changing requirements. We need to empower the teams. The organizations, we'll talk about shifting left in a second, but we need to basically empower the teams so that the teams can actually also drive the organization as well, drive the organization to the excellence that it's looking for. We also don't we're a species, we're not happy to basically sit in one place and do the same thing over and over again. So let's look at evolving our methodologies, which are development methodologies, testing methodologies, and also adopting tools that can enhance our agility. Agility being our quickness to be able to sort of come up with a requirement, understand the requirement, develop the requirement, and release it quickly.
And you mentioned Sohail earlier, it's and I think you were spot on in regard to the BDD, behavior driven development, or some may refer to it as business driven development. That's something I get asked about a lot at conferences and at different user group meetings I attend and speak at, as well as TDD, test driven development.
Correct. Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. The methodologies, just like the technologies, the changes, the processes, they're all evolving.
And they're evolving to be better, and the technologies are going to get better and better as we go along. So yes, absolutely. And then of course, when we look at it from a testing environment of today versus tomorrow, I mean, the analytics here that are provided to us help us to really sort of focus in on how to better create efficiencies within our agile process, create better efficiencies within our automation, better efficiencies within our DevOps environment. Because without that analytics, we're really kind of hitting in the dark, right? So if we have the analytics, we can actually improve all the methodologies, we can improve the processes, we can even improve the automation. Now going on to the automation functionality, again, automation is one of those things that everyone basically sort of says, well, I run into automation roadblocks all the time. Again, not everything can be automated. Let's be very clear about this. I mean, we talk about this a lot in different sort of conversations, white papers, and that sort of thing. But essentially, automation is something that you really need to focus in on. We need to basically figure out from your application what things can be automated readily, easily, and be more, repeatable. If we basically pick those out and we take that and say we'll automate it, then the question then becomes, how do we automate it? What are the tools that are available? There are a number of different tools that are available from Selenium onwards that will allow you to be able to automate your testing. Again, the better you are at doing that, the better you're going to have an agile development environment that's basically sort of in tune with what you're doing. Your speed increases, your return on investment gets better, and of course that always leads to improved accuracy and efficiency.
And so I've got a couple of questions here from the audience specific to automation. So if you don't mind, I'm going to throw those out to you now. So the first one here is, how much automation can be done?
Right. And it's a good question. How much automation can be done is very much dependent on the organization, the application that you're working with. Everyone kind of basically, and several organizations that I work with, they said, we want to do automation. We want to basically be very good at doing that. It depends on the application. It depends on the automation tool, right? And there are a number of them out there. So being stuck with one is not the right answer. You may actually require a couple of tools to basically do your full automation. And if you're trying to deal with ERP systems, that becomes another layer of complexity on top. So again, automation is something that has to be analyzed, has to be sort of driven down to the nth degree to figure out what things can be readily, easily, and more efficiently create automation for. And if you do that, then yes, you've solved that problem. But the amount of automation that's required, that again, like I said, it depends on the organization and depends on the application itself and the tools they're using.
And the methodologies and everything.
Correct.
Great point. And then here's just one more for you in regard to automation. Do you have any specific recommendations for automation tools and any tips on implementing those tools?
Yeah, so this is something that we kind of, as Checkpoint Technologies, that's one of the things that we do is we actually work with clients to basically do assessments. And we do assessments because every organization is different. Every organization has different requirements, has different applications, has different development teams. So we need to understand how you're doing the implementation, what sort of automation tools will be required for it, and what's the best for you as an organization. one tool does not fit every single organization. So there are different tools available. And of course, let's not forget the maturity, right? So as an organization, it depends on your maturity as to what level you are to define what level of automation you need to basically be at.
All right, great, fantastic, and thanks for those questions.
Yes, appreciate that. And let's also talk about the efficiencies, right? So automation is going to be important, but let's look at, and this is as an independent source, it's called Sensor Tower, that basically produced this report. Now, this is specifically dealing with the iOS and the Android market, but essentially their prediction by 2024 is, $55.5 billion market. Now, if we are not careful about what we're doing, if we're very cognizant about the organization and looking at things in a holistic way rather than a myopic way, then we can achieve a portion of that as part of your success. But if we don't, then somebody else is going to come in and snatch that market from you. So it's very important that we understand how to embrace that change, how to basically sort of become a team player, how to use quality as part of your team, right? Now, it sounds very simple because in a lot of organizations, and believe me, I've done a lot of assessments of organizations, mature organizations, and you walk in and you say, okay, so what sort of methodology are you using? Well, I have pods, I have my DevOps groups, I have my testers, my PMs, and they have the perfect model in their head. But in practice, it doesn't really work. And the reason why it doesn't work is because some people just don't embrace the change very well. So if I were to look at it from a quality as a team sport perspective, right? So now I'm saying, okay, it's all in the perception, right? So if I look at the I, that's me, I'll be told to write a piece of code to update a database script. Okay, great. I've written the code. Here's the script. Off you go. Then if I look at the we, I'm looking across at my teammate saying, hey, bud, are you working on that project too? Yes. Hey, listen, I've written this script. Oh, by the way, you've forgotten to basically include a certain field value that also needs to be updated. So now I have to go back and I have to basically rework my script to basically sort of cater for that environment. But if we look at it from a team perspective, now we have the whole picture, the holistic view, the whole vision in our head. We know that there's different things that we need to apply to. So by that time I'm writing my script, I've already got an idea in terms of what I'm going to be doing. So I need to cater for that. Another way to look at this is if you're walking down the street, and this is a little bit of humor for you, but good humor in the sense that it really applies to what we're talking about. If I'm walking down the street and I talk to a gentleman down there laying bricks, and I say to him, I said, what are you doing? And he says, well, I'm laying bricks. What does it look like? Well, that's an answer. But then I walk down, 10 yards down the sidewalk, and I see this other guy, and I say to him, I said, what are you doing? He goes, I'm building a cathedral. That's what I'm talking about, the holistic versus the myopic view. The first person basically said, I'm laying bricks. It's very simple. What's difficult about this? The other person said, I'm building a cathedral. It's the difference between delivering a world-class solution versus not delivering a world-class solution, but delivering it on time, because you are part of the team. We're not talking about the pod, we're talking about the organization. So team sport, right? In theory, everyone, as I said, in an agile team is responsible for software testing, but in practice, this really is the case. So when we look at it from how often we've seen testers who write test cases and automation in isolation and execute them after development's finished. Again, I'm not saying it happens all the time, but I think it's prevalent. Developers who write code, let's go back to the model I was talking about. If we had a BDD format where our requirements written in clear form, then the developers would be writing code that the testers would be able to accept, right? Product owners who elaborate requirements, again, requirements go back to that big behemoth that people think it is. It's really not. We need to understand the granular form of a requirement. And in this day and age, when you're dealing with web apps, and I go out and do a survey and I find that my customers are looking for certain things, I need to be able to document, articulate very clearly, very quickly, and put it into the hands of the business analysts who can then push it to the product owners. Again, organizations, we as human beings have the ability to be able to improve ourselves, right? It's just a question of execution. Quality is not an act. It's a habit. It's a team effort. It's something that's driven. We don't get up one morning and go, hey, I'll do 2 hours of quality now. It's something that's habitual. It's something that you need to basically be at all the time. I mean, let's leave out the software side. Let's leave out the application. As quality goes, I walk into the organization and, Bob's sitting right next to me and he's the CEO of the company. I'm not particularly involved in anything that he does on a day-to-day basis, but as an organization, I want to contribute. My quality is to contribute to Bob's suggestions and ideas that can improve the organization. But let's go back to code for a minute. So what we've done is we've taken plan, code, build, test, release, and deploy and operate all together and shifted it left into one unified team. That gives us the ability to be able to say, yes, we can actually produce something quickly and very efficiently. And then quality also means continuous delivery. Now, continuous delivery, as I said before, there are multiple different ways in which we can achieve this. We want to look at continuous operation, planning, integration, testing, monitoring. Monitoring is key, by the way. The KPIs are very key, because if you don't have the KPIs, you don't have the monitoring that basically tells you how well you're doing, how are you going to improve. Again, data is not to be shunned. It's not to shy away from. Data is to be, you need to basically wrap yourself in the data so you understand how you can do things better the following time. And again, all of this has to be, we have to basically have organizations develop this. Teams can start doing it, but essentially organizations need to basically sort of get into a management structure that it's from the top down, right? I say humble, curious, enlightened leadership. That basically means that you're, as leaders in the organization, you need to explain and you need to basically enthrall people into getting into this sort of mood and working within this particular ecosystem. Setting the tone. It's not something you just go out and bark orders at, but you've got to practice it. Integrity, ethical values, corporate climate, having the right role models and every organization has them. It's just a question of sharing that information, creating therefore the culture of quality and a commitment to the competence, right? Which then also involves the organizational structure that brings everything together from that perspective.
And Sohail, if I could interject here, I mean, we obviously are very excited to have Sohail on the team. And one of the things he and I did was we collaborated in discussing some of the points and thoughts we wanted to share during the webinar. We actually had it titled Quality is a Team Sport. And then just in talking, we said, let's change it to Quality as a Team Sport, to change the thought process to it needs to be a perception. It has to be something you embrace. And hopefully everybody can hear how passionate Sohail is about quality assurance, software testing. And that's what we're talking about, embracing it and having that culture of quality. And this is so important that QAI Worldwide actually teaches a lesson on this in their CSTE, Certified Software Test Engineer certification exam, which I'm very pleased to be able to teach. But, we talked about this, and it truly is, you've got to have a culture of quality. Develop that passion within your team.
Yep, absolutely. It's essential. And, from that perspective, just to kind of tell you what we do from an organizational perspective. I'm sure Bob's going to go into it a little bit more detail, but as a VP of Technical Services, I have a team that works for me. And it's one of those things that I basically tell people. And by the way, this is an interesting philosophy here. There's the cry wolf theory, you cry wolf 3 times and nobody shows up. My sort of movement within the organization is to say, hey, listen, cry wolf early. If you suspect a problem, bring it up so that we can address it. If it really is a problem, we're ahead of the curve. We can fix it in time. But if it really isn't a problem, then so great, wonderful. We had it, we solved it, we moved on, but we haven't lost any time. So again, it depends on the culture. It depends on how you sort of visualize things. I mean, just very recently, it happened where I was working with a client, and I walked into Bob's office and said, "We may have a problem." Right? And I put it up there on the table so that everyone knew about it. But I went back to my desk and we sat down, we worked it out, and we sort of solved the problem. At the end of the day, did it cost me anything? No. But if it had been a problem, at least Bob would know about it and he would be sort of working towards a solution for it. So the more people we can actually involve in this culture of quality and commitment to the competence, the better it is. So in summary, challenges achieving quality there are challenges, right? So let's not be coy about this. There are challenges. People don't really adapt very well, but if we are cognizant about that and we have good role models, they can actually do that. Benefits of treating quality as a team sport, obviously there is huge benefits to that. The better delivery, more efficient work that you can done. The evolution of quality, again, will also, what we talked about is between the 80s, 90s, and 2018, but quality is going to evolve. Applications are going to evolve. Delivery is going to evolve. The cost of change and its impact, that's something that we have to be very cognizant about. Quality must be a mindset. It is a culture. It's a mindset that we have to sort of be very cognizant about. It's something that we have to live, breathe, and eat, even if we are at home. And I'll give you a simple example. I walk into the house. If I find something in the sink, I will pick it up, put it in the dishwasher, clean the sink. It's just a form of habit. It's a mindset that you use, whether you're doing home or you're doing software delivery or you're doing consulting work. It's a mindset. It has to be there.
All right. And Sohail, we actually have some great time for questions, and we've got several questions. So all of you on the line, please feel free to submit any other questions you might have for Sohail or for me. But here are some of the questions. These are great. So change is a nice term, but how do you implement such a change in culture?
It's something that we talked about earlier on. It's something that it's not easily done, right? So a lot of people aren't, we're not all built to accept change very readily. But role models are important. Visualization is important. When you show somebody that you can do something better and more efficient, then it becomes something that they can sort of grasp. I'm not sure if you remember, there's an old movie with Days of Thunder. I can't remember.
Oh, yeah.
What's his name?
With Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
And in that,
Race
he was this guy who came out from, riding lower class vehicles, and he came out, got into the car, and he drove it around the circuit. And he did, good timing, except he was blowing his tires out. He was literally shredding his tires until the guy who was there, the mentor there, told him to say, do 5 laps the way you want, do 5 laps the way I tell you to. Big difference in the approach that they took, and the results were dramatic.
Yep, that's a great point. And one of the other things I would add, and this is coming from my perspective as an employer, that if you want to change your culture and make it a culture of quality, start with the hiring process.
Correct.
Start with the hiring process. Identify the attitudes and traits in people and perhaps team members that you have. And I know several of you joining us today, and I'll give one a shout out, Pam. And I can tell you, when I'm hiring people, there are a lot of times I think of the strengths and attributes that Pam has that I want those emulated in engineers that we hire. So start with the hiring process. Thank you for that question. So how does the size of a team impact the effort to develop a culture of quality? And what about the team members' location if they're all remote? And geez, considering COVID-19 right now,
exactly,
that's a great question.
Right, yeah. So, let's just kind of deal with the size of the team. Again, we're not talking about one big behemoth monolithic team. We're talking about individual groups. Individual groups can then be broken down into the pods. So it's it's a question of flowing the information. So one group starts doing it right and they've adopted the culture. The second group will also follow. The third group will follow that, and so on and so forth. And especially in this time and age when we have this COVID-19, and again, I hope everyone's safe and I hope everyone's well. But COVID-19 has caused a lot of organizations to abandon their offices and have people work remotely. And to that end, they have daily stand-ups on Zoom, on WebEx, on GoToMeetings, on a number of different platforms where everyone is continuously talking. Let's leave that aside. Then we have Slack, we have Teams, we have Jabber, we have a lot of different communication methods. So there's no excuse for people not to be able to collaborate, even if you are thousands of miles away.
Great. Thank you, Sohail. And here's another one, which is excellent because it's something you always need to figure out. So how do you measure success?
Aha. Again, I mentioned that earlier on in the presentation. It's the analytics, it's the KPIs, it's the results that you're getting, right? So you need to basically look at that. Now, as with anything else, I'll give you a very simple example. A company came to me and said, came to the checkpoint and said, hey, listen, we're kind of playing around with this whole concept of agile. We're a very heavily waterfall methodology, and we've been driven that way for years. We don't expect to basically be agile tomorrow, but we want to try and get to a certain, levels. One of the things that we had to do with them was basically do agile coaching, which is to explain to them how to basically sort of take a requirement that comes from a waterfall and break it down to smaller chunks. And then we had to sit with them. And then we had to sort of go through several iterations of that. So we finally got them to the point where they were beginning to understand this. But they also said, well, how's this benefiting us? I said, well, we need to understand what your velocity is. We need to understand how much and how well you're doing at this. So the next 6 months were looking at all the different releases and finding out how well these teams work together to produce the releases. And those KPIs were a very good indicator for the organization as to measuring their success. And again, measuring success is all about results, analytics, and being able to sort of derive a result from that.
All right, fantastic. And I'm going to, because I think there's some synergy here with this next question. With COVID-19, do you think it's harder to function as a team or easier?
Well, actually, I don't think it's harder or easier. I think it's just, like I said, it's a mindset. And, us as an organization during the lockdown period, we were actually in working from the office, working from home, sorry. And we were having conversations all the time. It was, yes, I did miss the physical interaction, but the communication and sort of collaboration still existed. And there is no reason why COVID or any other reason, distance, whatever the case may be, should interfere with that.
All right, excellent. And, I agree with your statement there. And for those of you who heard that music, that was an ice cream truck going by. So now I have this craving to go out and get a strawberry shortcake ice cream or something. But, so, one of the things I found with COVID-19 is you're right. I don't think it's harder nor easier. It just, it's a different mindset and you have to do different things, maybe have a few more meetings, and just, especially with COVID-19, check-in with the teams more often as individuals and saying, hey, how you doing? Don't always talk business. So great point, Sohail. Let me see. We have time for maybe just one more question. What's the next big change you anticipate in application delivery or DevOps?
Oh, that's a big question.
It is.
I think that, I'm not a soothsayer. I'm not going to be able to predict the future. I don't know exactly how that's going to pan out, but there are new technologies coming out. I think that we're seeing some of this stuff unfortunately, we're seeing some of the stuff
in application, but in the wrong areas like facial recognition and that sort of thing. Again, I'm a big movie buff, so if I look at, say, for example, Minority Report as a movie, as you walk through the store, there's the facial recognition that detects who you are, and then there's the, oh, this person bought this, 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 and this, and then that store knows exactly what to basically market them. Artificial intelligence kind of building into that environment, right? So we are now basically sort of getting to that point where the complexities of the application are going to be just, exponentially huge. So how do we manage all that? That's the big thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, I've always felt as though, and you're right, we're not soothsayers, but artificial intelligence, without a doubt. And then the other thing I firmly believe is we're going to find ways to decrease the number of staging environments, if you will, that we have, especially in DevOps. And I honestly believe basically what you're going to see someday is you're going to have just 2 mirror images of prod. And on Monday, we have version A, which is on, and version B is what's used for our development and testing. And then at midnight on Monday, we turn version B on, and that becomes prod for Tuesday. And version A becomes our dev and testing environment.
Yeah, but
so it becomes almost a flip of a switch.
But yeah, so I think you're right. But I think also that we're, from a day-to-day perspective, it's one thing, but we're looking at it from an hour-to-hour perspective. So the flip switches are going to be happening at a rapid rate.
That's a great point. Absolutely. Yeah. I was keeping it simple, but you're right. They're going to be happening very quickly. So thank you so much for all of those questions. We don't have time for actually, wait a minute. We might have time just for one more. Let me throw this out there. What KPIs have you seen used to measure success? So, one of the things I've seen a lot of is they'll start off measuring, obviously, the number of defects reported.
Correct.
What you should expect when you improve a process is an actual increase in defects, not a decrease initially, because you're finding more defects. Your processes have improved, and finding defects is a good thing. It gets you that much closer to perfect software. And then you should start to see the defects, after a bit of maturity, decrease. The other thing, number of defects in production.
So I think just to add to that point, when Bob was talking about the number of defects being higher in the initial stages, we go back to the whole Teams environment, and we're talking about the pods, and we're talking about the BAs and working in collaboration with the developers and testers. That's what we're referring to, because we're going to find defects in the requirements, which we fix earlier on, will then taper down so that our development software releases are going to have less. So yes, initially, it might be the case that we have these higher requirements analysis and defects, but the more mature we get, the better we are at handling it, those will go down as well. So I think the KPI really is looking at the number of defects. How long does your release cycle take? How often do you make those release cycles? How accurate are they? There's some of the basic ones, but essentially, we can kind of go through this.
Yeah, no, later. Great point. And we will, there have been a couple of questions about KPIs and metrics, and Sohail and I will brainstorm, and we will include that if you just email us. And I want to be respectful of your time. I'm not going to go on about Checkpoint Technologies right now and all of the different things that we do that we are very, very proud to provide. We've been in business for over 17 years. Here are a couple of webinars that are coming up. You'll notice I have hiring tips there. We haven't figured out the catchy title, but we'll be doing a great webinar on that, which we're excited about. But here is our contact information. Please feel free to email Sohail or myself, or both of us. We're also on LinkedIn. Checkpoint Technologies also has a LinkedIn page. Please connect to us, email us any questions, any thoughts that you may have. And with that said, we're going to close off for today. Please stay safe, stay well, and thank you, Sohail. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.